Hello everyone and welcome to this priest review. We're going to be reviewing the priest cards from Knights of the Frozen Throne. I'm joined by Zamok
Hello.
and yeah, so we're going to be discussing the cards, some disclaimers up front. This is before the cards have been released. We haven't had a chance to play with any of these cards yet. We're just sort of going on some theory crafting and looking at our understanding of the game and how these cards will fit into the game. And we've got some deck lists up that we'll bring up after we go through the cards. Uh, and we're going to be rating the cards on a 1 to 5 rating based on playability. So with a 5 being a card that you're likely to see in, let's say, every deck of a class or something like that, and 1 being a card that's like there's just no deck for it. It doesn't make any sense. It might be a good card, but there might not be any deck that really makes sense for it. So just keep that in mind. An expansion or two down the line that might change if all of a sudden, a certain like archetype becomes more viable as it gets more support.
So what time frame are we looking at? Are we talking about like the first 3 weeks of the expansion, or are we talking about once the meta
No,
settles?
for the whole length of this expansion. So we're talking about the whole length of the expansion.
It's
Obviously,
more after the meta settles then, right?
yeah, yeah. So, we're talking like what's the viability going to be, let's say, in the medium to long term, like until we get the next expansion.
Okay.
We can't really speculate about cards we don't know anything about yet. So, okay. So, as with all the classes, we're going to start with the Death Knight hero. So, the Death Knight is a new hero card that replaces your existing hero. Usually, the Death Knights also have like Battle Cry kind of effects. These are legendaries and they come with extra 5 armor for your hero. So for Priest, we have Shadow Reaper Anduin. So this is an 8 mana legendary with Battle Cry, destroy all minions with 5 or more attack. So basically, board wide Shadow Word Death on all minions, including your own. So he also changes your hero power to be Void Form. So Void Form, 2 mana cost, and it deals 2 damage to any target minion or hero. And after you play a card, refresh this. So if you play Void Form, Powered Shield, you'll be able to use Void Form again, right? So that's kind of how it works. So an interesting way to make the hero power be able to be used more times in a turn. So your initial thoughts on Shadow Reaper Anduin, Zemok?
I mean, obviously it fits in a slower priest build. I mean, that's going to be most of the case with almost all the priest cards. Um, but I mean, in a very slow priest build, right?
Mm.
It's one of the ways that priests can dish out a nice AoE because currently the only way that they can deal with big threats is with, I mean, they've got a few single target removal, like you've got your 2 Shadow Word Deaths. But outside of that, it's very difficult for Priest to deal with big minions. So Shadow Reaper Anduin's gonna give Priest a way to deal with decks such as like Jade Druid or decks with just a lot of pesky 5 attack minions that Priest can't deal with. My
Yeah.
initial thoughts on the card is that I initially thought it wasn't that great, but I mean, the more I look at it, the more I can see it fitting in one of those longer priest games because one of the slower priest decks because the hero power is actually a way that priest can just slowly close out the game. You know, use the control cards that priest has access to, and then just maybe dealing 2 damage every turn to a face, or just using that 2 damage ping. It's 2 damage ping is like a very powerful effect, which I imagine something that people overlook.
Yeah, I mean, people have been trying to get Shadow Form for Priest to work for years, and it's never really worked. But in this case, it actually comes with a pretty good effect when you play it. The Battle Cry, destroying all minions with 5 or more attack, is like a pseudo light bomb in a sense. Like, that's kind of the thing it reminds me of the
Yeah.
most, I suppose, in that you're destroying a lot of strong minions, good against also maybe something like Paladin, where you can kill off the Tyrion. And you don't have to worry about. You can use your Shadow Word Deaths a little bit more liberally, as
Yes.
you can have Shadow Reaper Anduin as a response to some of the other later big threats. And obviously, Jade Druid is the one card, right? One of the big problems with any control priest at the moment is Jade Druid, and Shadow Reaper Anduin does help against that.
It was
So,
all Vincent Zoth.
yeah, it does also help versus in Zoth decks. Like, when you're bringing back multiple Tyrions, well, Shadow Reaper Anduin's a pretty good answer to a board like that. So, your thoughts on Shadow Reaper Anduin as a whole? Where would you rate him in that 1 to 5
Uh,
scale?
Look, I think 3 stars is quite like I think a fair answer is 3. I'm gonna rate it 2. because I think it's 3, but only in a very niche meta, and I'm not even sure if it makes the cut for Control Priest, because I think that just cards like Lyra and um, and the Radiant Elemental just are so powerful at the moment already. Like we've seen their power already, so it's difficult to gauge how powerful this will be if it's stronger than Lyra. But Lyra is a very powerful card, and this will only see play if it can match that power level and in a very niche meta. So I'm gonna say 2 stars, maybe 3. I'd
Okay.
like to say 2.5, but I don't know if we're doing half.
No, not really. But
Yeah.
I would say to me, I think it's more of a 3 leaning on a 4. So
Oh,
sort of,
really?
yeah. I actually think that the AOE effect is pretty powerful. The hero power, as you mentioned, is actually very good for cleaning up the smaller boards. So like the 5 attack. Battle Cry, destroying all the things with 5 attack or more attack, helps to deal with the big minions on board, and Void Form can help you deal with the smaller minions if when you're
Okay.
left as well. So I think that it fits the control shell that Priest wants. Like
Okay.
very often you want to just, let's say, Shadow Word Visions your Dragonfire potions for more AoE. Well, at some point that stops scaling, that stops defeating Jade boards and whatnot, and Shadow Reaper Anduin helps here. It's not really gonna make Priest favorable against Jade because you can only play this once, but it does give you some kind of help in the late game there. So I think it's a 3, almost leaning on a 4. I think there are some more tempo-oriented decks, or like Silence Priest, where you're not really going to see a card like this played
Yeah.
though.
Okay. Well, I'll go for 3 then. But I think that's the main issue. I'd like you play this, but then you've played it, right? They can just refill the board, and that's the main issue. So I'm gonna definitely, I think after that, I'm gonna say 3.
Yeah, and it is 8 mana to do that. So playing this is not a lot you can do in that same turn, which is pretty important. With most board clears, you want to be able to develop or something.
Yeah.
Okay, and next we have the Priest Legendary Minion, Archbishop Benedictus. This is a 7 mana 4/6 with Battle Cry. Shuffle a copy of your opponent's deck into your deck. Wow, that's crazy value, Zaymok. Surely this is a 5.
Whoa!
Surely
Okay.
this is a 5. Your whole opponent's deck? Come on.
I'm gonna actually say it's a
Hashtag
6. It's that
sarcasm.
good.
Okay, no, okay. I was hoping you were supposed to give me the non-sarcastic answer. So what? Why is this card bad?
Okay, well, when you're playing Hearthstone, generally you're playing a deck that has a very specific game plan. If you're playing Control Priest, you want to try and control the board, just stall out, win the game through value, with cards like Elise. If you're playing Miracle Rogue, you want to, play Gadget Stand, draw lots of cards, play your Arcane Giants and whatnot. Every deck has a specific game plan. Zoo tries to flood the board, etc. I mean, I can go on this for ages. And the issue with this card is it just screws with any game plan that you have. So it makes your deck unbelievably inconsistent. You can't really play this and then expect to win a game with cards in your own deck because you're gonna be playing with cards from your opponent's deck. And the reason those cards will be in your opponent's deck is because they have certain jobs in that deck, right?
Yeah,
If you're playing Priest, you don't want to draw a Treachery that you got from a Warlock because it's never going to help you.
yeah,
Um, and so you just dilute your own draws and you make them very inconsistent. And I think the card's very fun and like you can have a lot of interesting and quirky games with it, and we'll see a bunch of Trollden highlights with it. But I think the card is just absolutely terrible on a competitive standpoint, and I'm willing to say it'll never see competitive play naturally, as in it was put in the deck and then played intentionally.
yeah, yeah. I think as you highlight, like you know, this is like not really a 7 cost card at all, right? You playing this on 7 is just always awful. You have like close to 20 cards of your own in your deck, and your opponent has close to 20 of theirs. Now you mix that, so as you're saying, you're getting 2 different strategies, and now you're drawing like half of the one, half of the other. Unless their deck is full of tons of card draw, and you can filter through their cards to get back to yours or something. Like even then, that's still pretty bad. So I mean, people talk about the like being an anti-fatigue, and then you can play like towards a fatigue game plan, but that's really not likely
Yeah.
to see play. I mean, it's really just Priest is not the best deck at doing that. So yeah, Archbishop Benedictus, that's going to be a 1 from me.
One. Yeah. Same
Yeah.
for me. 1 star.
Okay, and then we have a slightly more interesting card, Obsidian Statue. So Obsidian Statue is a 9 mana 4/8 epic minion with Taunt, Lifesteal, and Death Rattle. Destroy a random enemy minion. So obviously, Taunt and Lifesteal is a pretty good combo late into the game when you've actually taken damage, which is exactly what Obsidian Statue, it will always be late in the game at 9 mana pretty much. And the Death Rattle, destroy a random enemy minion. Even though you might think, oh, maybe they have lots of like low value minions on the board or something, that it's actually not necessarily that likely unless you're playing against Paladin or Shaman, where they actually have access to the hero power. Because
Okay.
this is like later into the game, right? Where they are likely going to have expended some of their minions. And ideally, you play something like Shadow Reaper Anduin into this, or some kind of board clear into this. That's going to help. It means that they're most likely going to develop a bigger minion, and then Obsidian Statue can also have a pretty good job of, like, you know, dealing with 1 to 2 minions, depending on
And it's almost
how
always
the
restoring full health to your hero, which isn't irrelevant.
yeah. At
Because
least 4 health, right? Because there's not a lot of 8 attack minions,
y
so it's very often that they might have to attack 2 minions into Obsidian
yes, yes,
Statue,
yes.
and then that's
But,
8 health.
I mean, the issue is spells, but even then, like it's at eight, it's 8 health, right? Like there's not a lot of ways to clear a minion with 8 health, and even Priest can't really deal with it because of Shadow of Death and Pain both just miss the 4 attack mark. So that and like most classes don't really have a way to deal with this. With one card, even like a spell heavy class like Mage will have a hard time just removing this with one spell, or with you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking
Uh,
at like Meteor, Polymorph, those kind of things are
yeah,
pretty much the ways.
and
So
those are
you
very
really don't
premium.
want to spend a Pyroblast on it, obviously.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, the main issue with the card is that it's 9 mana.
Yeah.
The effect is very good, and the combination between Taunt, Lifesteal, and the Death Rattle effect is obviously very strong. As you said, it doesn't really matter that it could just destroy a 1/1 or a 0/2 totem. The effect does come in late, so you probably are going to hit a higher value target. But the main issue is definitely that it's 9 mana, and the question
Mm,
is it is it able to actually see play, and is it able to have a big enough impact fast enough, right? Like as a priest, you have to get to 9 mana and then you have to play this. Are there better cards to play before this? Is the effect still like are you in a position where the effect can still keep you even on board, right? Like, or have you just fallen behind too much where this card isn't able to bring you back into the game? I mean, if the card was just a few low stats and came in on 6, it's a much more potent effect on turn 6 because it impacts the board. Then, like the early stages of the game are much more what's the word, like inducive of where the game will go, right? And so the
yes.
sooner a card can come down and have impact, the sooner it can affect the way the game goes, and the sooner it can affect whether you will win or lose the game. And that's, I think, the main issue is just the high mana cost. I mean, we'll see cards like Barnes being played, I'm sure. Cards like Shadow Essence, which we'll get to later, another priest card that's new to the set, and that will probably be played in conjunction with it. But it's definitely just going to come down to, is 9 mana too much for this card, and will the card actually see play because of that? Because I think the effect is very strong, the card is very strong, but the mana cost certainly hits it quite hard.
Yeah. There are a lot of interesting synergies with it being a Death Rattle minion as well that we will, as well as some of the other cards you mentioned like Shadow Essence and that we'll get to just now, and we'll get to Obsidian Statue. Well, we'll return to it I think a bit when we're discussing the decks, but for now I'm gonna say it's a 3. I think that most priest decks that want to go late will include this, given that they can get away with it. I think the big thing is that you need to set up a pattern of play whereby you clear the board a turn or two before this and then play this. You can't really be playing this when they have 4 or 5 minions on board, otherwise the effect's probably not going to be enough. The healing is definitely beneficial there, but you're going to need something more as well. So I think that's kind of the pattern of play you're looking for with Obsidian Statue. You're looking to clear the board a turn or two before, something like Dragonfire Potion or Shadow Reaper Anduin, and then play your Obsidian Statue, which can then gain you a bunch of health and hopefully pick off a good minion. So for me, it's going to be a 3. I think, there are definitely quite a few priest decks that are not going to want it, but in the right priest decks, it is going to be a very important card. So like,
Um,
it's like a 3 leaning on a 2 because honestly, a lot of the decks are not going to want it, but I say 3 because,
I was
yeah,
about to say 3 leaning on 2.
oh, okay.
I was
Bec-
literally about to say 3 leaning on 2.
because, really, in the decks where it is good, it's very good. But in the
Yeah.
decks where it's like, and I think the decks where it's very good are not, like, impossible to foresee. They're not like decks with definitely like, they're not pie in the sky like ideas. They are reasonable decks, but majority of decks it's probably not good. But
I was literally, you took the words out on 3 leaning on 2. So
cool. And then next we have Embrace Darkness. Would you like to tell us about Embrace Darkness?
Embrace Darkness is a 6 mana priest spell. It is an epic spell. And the text reads, choose an enemy minion at the start of your turn, gain control of it. So it's very similar to 2 cards. So it's very similar to Corruption in the sense that it's you kind of have to wait a turn to go. Corruption, as we know, is the 1 mana warlock spell at the start of your turn, destroy an enemy minion.
Yep.
you have to play it, and then mind control, which is take control of an enemy minion. So it's kind of like a combination of the two. In fact, it's funny because the mana cost is like halfway in between the two as well. I didn't notice that until right now. I don't
Well,
think the card
corruption
is.
is 1 mana, but
Yeah. But like
roughly.
1 in 10, like halfway is like what, 5/6.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So
Yeah,
you were
that's
saying.
what. Anyways, yeah. I don't think the card is very strong. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I just think the card really isn't that powerful. Generally, if you want to, like, there's not very many minions you're going to want to take controller from your enemy. They're generally going to be big drops that you're going to want to use this on, or cards that have been buffed. But even then, you'd rather remove it because if you use this effect on it, you give them a chance to trade favorably with it or unfavorably
Mm,
with their minion. You also give them a chance. I mean, you also give them a chance to actually just attack with that minion again, right? That's the main thing.
yeah.
So I think just proactively removing it is much better.
Yeah. No.
So I'm gonna. I don't. Should I give the star now?
Yeah, you can.
I'm gonna give it a 1 star because I just don't think the card is very good.
Yeah, I agree. I would also say it is a 1 out of 5. The big thing is that, as you said, you give your opponent a turn with the minion, so they can do what they want. They can trade it off. They can get more value. This is not helping against, let's say, a Gadgetzan Auctioneer. It's pretty terrible against that. You give them a whole turn to draw. They don't really care if you get it afterwards. I think that the effect is just a bit too slow. It only really works to actually get the minion when you have nothing on board that they can trade it into. And if you are in that situation, you're going to need a lot more than just Embrace Darkness to really win. And
Yeah.
Priest just has a lot better removal to use, right? This card just doesn't make sense, when you could just Shadow Word Death or Pain um, the minions. So next we have Shadow Essence. This is the card you mentioned a bit. Do you want to give us a bit more
Yeah,
of an
sure.
idea of the card?
Shadow Essence is a 6 mana priest spell as well. It is rare, and the text reads: Summon a 5/5 copy of a random minion in your deck. And immediately, a bunch of cool combos come to mind. I know both of us thought of Malygos initially. There's a cool
Hmm.
way to bring out a card like Malygos. But a 6 mana 5/5 already isn't bad. That's pretty standard stats for a 6 mana card. 6 mana minion, I mean. And the great thing about this is you can get a lot of cool effects. Death rattle minions like the Obsidian Statue. You can pull out things like Can, so this fits quite naturally into some kind of N'Zoth Priest deck. You could put out a 6/6, I mean a 5/5 version of Lyra, which is a lot more stronger than the 3/5 version. The card itself seems a bit underwhelming, but actually there's a lot of cool things that you can do with it, and I think the card is actually quite powerful.
Yeah.
At first glance, it doesn't look amazing because it's just a 6 mana 5/5. It could just be a 6 mana 5/5 a lot of the time, but if you build the deck around this card, which is very easy to do actually, because there's a lot of effects that you want, either death rattle or like end of turn effects like your Sarah, etc. Um, it is actually quite a powerful card. I
Yeah.
don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a bit of a build around, right? It's not a card you're going to just slam in any priest deck. It's not that great. Let's say Dragon Priest, where you're drawing like Primordial Drakes or something like that. That's maybe not, a particularly great use of Shadow Essence because most of those minions are, let's say, Battle Cry. But when you have your end of turns and your Death Rattle effects, that's really where Shadow Essence comes into the fore, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely what we're going to be in the position we're going to be seeing it. Whether those priest decks are viable is going to be a whole different story entirely. But I think given that those priest decks are viable, at least in let's say a tier 2 context, maybe they won't be the top tier priest decks. I think for me this Shadow Essence is a 3. I think it's actually an important tool in those decks, but in most decks it's probably not good.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 2 just because of how difficult it is to get it to work. And I think we are going to showcase some cool decks where the card definitely works. And those decks are very cool. Like they're going to be a lot of fun to play. But I still don't think I think the card is strong. But I think just in the meta that we're going to head into, it's very difficult to obviously predict the meta. But I think the decks that we're going to showcase aren't going to be like tier 1. And so playability, I'm going to give the card 2 stars.
Yep, that's fair. I think it's definitely around there. It's like I mean I give it a 3, but it is kind of it's a 3 in the decks that it's good in, and pretty much a 1 in every other deck.
Yeah.
So it is a very high variance card, and definitely like a build around, you
Yeah.
know. Okay, so
So,
next we have Devour Mind. Devour Mind is another priest spell. It's 5 mana and it's a rare, and it reads copy 3 cards in your opponent's deck and add them to your hand. So very much like Thought Steal,
It's just a worse thought steal.
Yeah, it costs 2 more mana and you get 1 more card than Thoughtsteal. But for 5 mana, I don't really think stealing 3 cards from your opponent's deck is that great. If you think about it, it mostly actually reminds me of Cabalist's Tome, except that you are, on average, I'd say hopefully getting better cards than you would from Cabalist's Tome, versus
Really?
the
I mean,
random.
Catalystom is 3 mage spells. Mage spells are pretty good.
Yeah, but I mean, I would hope that 3 cards from your opponent's deck are pretty good. But whether they actually synergize in your deck is the question,
Yes,
right?
that's kind of the same issue
Yeah.
that I touched on with Archbishop Benedictus, the priest legendary. Is that
Yeah.
whole issue of, you're getting cards that work in that deck, whereas mage spells are often just very powerful. You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
you're getting three
And
spells,
and they're in mage,
very
so
different. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I
The,
mean, I don't really know how much more there is to say. I just don't think the card is very good.
no,
Uh,
I agree. I think the card is way too slow, doesn't really do enough. Like, sure, it sounds like there's value there, but I'd much rather play Draconid Operative and actually get a choice plus a body
I would
anytime.
rather play Thoughtsteel.
Yes, I would rather play Thoughtsteal, but I mean, if you think about it, like, I would rather, like, if we look at some of the Control Dragon Priests, Draconid Operative is just far superior, right?
Yeah.
You get the body, you get a choice. Sure, you get less cards, but it's just so much better. So, Devourer Mind is going to be a 1 for me.
And same with me.
Cool. And
Next.
next we have another interesting card, Eternal Servitude. So this is a 4 mana priest spell, and it reads: discover a friendly minion that died this game, summon it. So
Ooh.
so we're getting another resurrection type effect, but this time it's a little bit more targeted. We actually get to discover a minion.
Yeah, it's a
So
control res, right?
yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Obviously, it costs 2 more mana basically for that ability to have some more control over it, the discoverability of it, right? But theoretically, if you can be discovering higher mana cost minions with Eternal Servitude, then it's pretty good. But most of the time, I think it's probably a bit slow.
Slow in what sense? I mean,
So like
it
for it to be good, you need good minions to have died, and for good minions to have died, this is coming down quite late in the game, right? So it's not a 4 mana cost card in the sense that you're not playing it on 4, you're not playing it on 5, you're not playing it anywhere around those turns. You're only really playing it later into the game after some other threats have died that are worth resurrecting.
Sorry about that. My thing died briefly.
No worries.
Um, yeah, no. I mean, I know what you mean. Like there's cards like Barnes that can help you alleviate that issue of that, like it being too slow.
Mhm.
But I quite like the card, even out of the funky decks that, as I said, we're going to show later with like Malygos and Zoth and whatnot. I still think the card is quite good in that kind of control priest, right? It's very good card. It's very good with cards like the Obsidian Statue. It's very good with I think even in Dragon Priest, it has some place, with cards like the Bone Drake, which is also another new card. It's a like a cool way to bring out Lyra as well. It's like a 4 mana Lyra. I think the card is strong also because you can, if there's a specific type of effect you want, and this is the main part of the card, right? Is there's a specific type of effect, you can almost force it,
Yeah.
and it gives you a second chance to get this powerful effect, be it a death rattle or an end of turn effect. So I think the card's quite strong. Um, I definitely think it's stronger than Shadow Essence.
Really, I actually think it's a bit weaker than Shadow Essence because it requires more. It requires the minion to have died, for one, versus the minion being in your deck, which on average the minion is more likely in your deck on 6 than it has died on 6. If we even look at casting Eternal Servitude on 6, right? I think I agree. Going into the much later game, Eternal Servitude gets better the later the game goes, where Shadow Essence gets worse, and that's definitely something to consider. But for me, I would say Eternal Servitude is probably like a 2, maybe a 3, but I think once again, it is a build around, much like Shadow Essence. And, both the cards are kind of in a similar space for me, but I think Shadow Essence maybe has a little bit wider application than Eternal Servitude. That's why I'm giving it a 2 as opposed to Shadow Essence a 3. But in the right decks, they're both like really good.
Yeah. Um, it's weird. I'm kind of flick-flacking. I want to give it a 3 because I do think it's stronger than Shadow Essence, but I kind of want to give it a 1 because it's so niche, right? It's
Yeah.
so niche. So I'm willing to give it a 1. I mean, it's better than Devour Mind. Don't
But
get me
but
wrong.
1 is like saying it'll never see play. That's what
Oh,
I'm
is
saying.
it? Okay, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like 2
That
is
was
like it sees some fringe play. Like 3 is, okay, it sees some play in specific decks
like
maybe.
tier 2 decks, right? Okay, so
Yeah,
I'll say
mostly.
I'll say 2 then. I'll say 2.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then we have the next priest card, which is not a spell for a change, and it's
So
Acolyte of Agony. It's a 3 mana, 3/3 minion
it's
at
common.
common, and it has lifesteal. So
Yeah, next card.
yeah, no for constructed play. I would rather
I didn't
lifesteal
really
early in
expect
the
it to
game
be
is
bad.
not good, in my opinion. We know that priests of all people know that healing early in the game is pretty ineffectual, as the hero power generally on 2 is not a particularly good plan. So more often than not, Acolyte of Agony is not actually going to be healing you much, and it's pretty much just a 3/3. So for that reason, I kind of think it's a 1. That's, yep,
I have no opinion on the card. The card is bad. It's a one.
it's bad.
So I lie. I do have an opinion. The card is bad. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty uninteresting card as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Next we have Spirit Lash. It is a 2 mana priest spell. Back to the spells I see. And it's a common card, and it's the text reads Lifesteal. Deal 1 damage to all minions. So it's, I mean, it can be quite a strong effect. It's kind of like Maelstrom Portal and Arcane Blast, with that 2 mana kind of 1 mana AoE effect. The difference between this and those is that this is to all minions, not just enemy minions, and it's got Lifesteal, which we know is damage dealt also heals your hero. So
Yeah.
it's actually very strong with cards like Blood Mage Spellknots, any spell damage, and suddenly this card becomes very good because you can have any spell damage plus this. Suddenly you've got this 2 damage AoE that will heal you to a great extent. So it's definitely going to see play in Control Priest, I'm sure of. I'm sure we'll see some sort of resurrection of Control Priest in the new expansion. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure it's at the moment it's kind of just hanging into tier 2, right? And I'm sure going into the new expansion it'll still stay at least a tier 2 deck. So I'm pretty sure this card will see play, and I think it's actually a very, very strong card, just for the job that it's wanting to do.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, as you point out, is just comboing it with spell power. That's the thing that really starts making Spirit Lash really, really powerful. And for that reason, it's just another useful AoE for priests. We already have Dragonfire Potion on the far end, but sometimes that you struggle to get to that Dragonfire Potion turn and survive. And Spirit Lash helps mitigate some of that falling behind in the early game to actually, have some earlier clear, especially if you are comboing it with that um, something like Blood Mage Stelnos, some kind of early spell damage. And then lastly, for Priest, we have Shadow Ascendant. So, oh right, sorry, we actually forgot to give Spirit Lash a rating. So I'm going to give Spirit Lash 4. I think that most Priest decks will want to play Spirit Lash or try to find a way to include Spirit Lash. I don't believe that, like, let's say every Priest deck will, because sometimes it's going to be a little bit difficult to actually make it work. And Priest has lots of situational and cards that it needs to combo with each other to make them work. So sometimes Spirit Lash is going to get cut, but I think it is probably one of the more powerful priest cards in this expansion.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. I think it's 4, and I 100% agree with pretty much everything you said. It's one of the most powerful priest cards that we've seen, and it's certainly, for me at least, it is the priest card that I'm most sure will see play.
Yeah.
There's gonna be, if it doesn't see any play, that's gonna be embarrassing. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
I mean, for me though, for me, because I've
ba-
said it's
ba-
like,
yeah, based on our ratings, that is exactly what you would expect too, right? It's the only one of our priest cards that are really rated a 4.
and I think it will be the only one.
Well, actually, I mean, I also rated Shadow Reaper Anduin a 4, I think. But anyway, so we have Shadow Ascendant, last of all. And this is a 2 mana, 2 drop. Oh, 2 drop for Priest. It's, it's, it's a common minion, and it reads, at the end of your turn, give another random friendly minion +1/+1. So, an effect somewhat similar to Tortal and Shellraiser's Death Rattle, in that it's about buffing other minions on the board. Biggest problem is Shadow Ascendant. Yeah, you have to be on board already, right? So the dream is what? Northshire Cleric into Shadow Ascendant?
No, it's not, because you have to kill the Shadow Ascendant.
No, you don't. Shadow Ascendant's not Death Rattle. It's at the end
Oh,
of
it's
your
the
turn.
end. Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but then what? Like, okay, 1 drop into 2 drop, and then what are you playing? Like
and but
Cabal Talon Priest? Okay, sure, there's your 3 drop, and then what's your 4 drop? Oh shit, we can't make Tempo Priest because that's not actually a deck. And then suddenly this card
because
doesn't make sense.
instead we just gave Priest a bunch of late game weird ass value spells instead of anything to support a card like this, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't think this card is inherently bad. I just
yes.
think it really doesn't have a deck. And I mean, like, for that I'm just gonna give it a 2. I don't think the card is so bad, but it really doesn't have a deck, and I don't think it'll see play as a result.
I'm gonna give it a 1 because it won't see. I don't think I'll see any play.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I'd also be happy to give it a 1 for that reason, I suppose. Very much, these ratings are about playability and not whether they're cards, so I suppose I'm being a bit biased. So yeah, 1 seems fair.
Cool.
And speaking of cards seeing play, we have some interesting decks that are definitely exploiting some of the more interesting synergies we spoke about. First off, we have two Malygos themed decks. We spoke a lot about the Eternal Servitude and Shadow Essence synergy, as well as, a similar thing to Barnes, right? So first off, we have my Priest deck, which is Malygos Priest, and the key here is that there's only 3 minions in the whole deck, and that's Barnes, Gadgetzan Auctioneer, and Malygos, right? So your Eternal Servitude is guaranteed to give you Malygos if it has died. There's no way for that not to happen. Except maybe I just realized
No, there's a
if you potion of madness in an enemy minion, you could be offered that, right?
that is true. Yeah, I didn't think of that either.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's possible that you have multiple bonds die, but you'll never be offered copies of the same card, or multiple gadgets and auctioneers die, but you'll never be offered two gadgets and auctioneers in your discover, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So anyway, the point is, you can get Malygos out. This is a deck where you never really want to draw Malygos. The deck gets a lot worse if you draw Malygos, which is already a red flag for a warning sign that it might not be a very good deck. Um, because you really want to pull Malygos out with Barnes or Shadow Essence, ideally. And then when the copy of Malygos dies, you can use that Eternal Servitude to bring it back and finish them off with the Mind Blasts and Holy Smites. That's, the idea here. It is a sort of Malygos finisher deck. There's also Shadow Visions to help out with getting more copies of the burn spells in particular. So you can end on 3 Mind Blasts or uh, you know 2 Mind Blasts and 4 Holy Smites or something like that, as well as Gadgets and Auctioneer to help with the draw, as this deck is obviously just a ton of spells. And there's also Spirit Lash helps with a bit of the AoE, and there's just a lot of synergy with Gadgets and Auctioneer and draw, because quite honestly, when building this deck, one of the biggest things we were struggling with was draw, and that's where the Gadgets and Auctioneers came in.
Yeah. So the big issue with the deck, as you said, is draw. And the other issue is the consistency, right? You mentioned that drawing Malygos is one issue. Drawing Malygos is one issue. The fact that you have to rely on Barnes to get the Malygos is another issue. The fact that you have to rely on Shadow Essence to get the Barnes is another. I mean, to get the Malygos is another issue. So consistency-wise, the deck is very hard to work. You kind of have to manipulate it so that you always want to like mulligan your Malygos, mulligan. You almost might keep something like an auctioneer, right? You might keep one auctioneer just to try and force the Barnes on the Malygos, right? That's something that's very difficult to do because you don't have control over what cards you draw.
Yeah, but the
But in
thing
the
is,
few ways that you do, you want to try to take advantage of it. Obviously, we see that you've got I see you've got one pint size and two Shadowwood Horror. I don't really understand that.
so the idea is, like, I was playing quite a lot of board clear, with Holy Novas, Dragonfire Potions, Shadow Word Horror, as well as Shadow Reaper Anduin. Essentially just running like absolute tons of board clear, as you're never going to be on the board. You're never going to be contesting the board with minions. So you have to be contesting the board with spells. And the only way to really do that in a valuable way is if you're getting multiple board clears. And Pint-Sized Potion, Shadow Word Horror just helps facilitate Shadow Word Horror being a bit better. Ultimately, I originally had 2 Pint-Sized Potions, but I had to cut them when I was trying to find space for the Gadgets and Auctioneers as well. And Shadow Word Horror, obviously, it is a bit situational depending on the meta, but if we're looking at, like, the meta where we've got quite a lot of token decks at the moment, pre-expansion launch, then Shadow Word Horror does definitely have a place against those kind of decks.
Yeah, so my main issue with the deck is, apart from all the Malygos stuff that it's difficult to draw, is that the deck starts on turn 4, right? And that's only if you draw Barnes. And then after that,
Yeah,
you kind of have to, like, because up to turn 4, the only cards you're going to be playing is Shadow Visions and Shadow Word Pain. So you have to
yeah,
have those in hand, right? Maybe you play a Holy Smite, but you kind of want to hold back the Holy Smite anyways. So you're pretty much doing nothing for 4 turns, maybe even 5 turns. The only turn that you guarantee to have something, and obviously you have to have the card, is the Shadow Essence. By this point, we're expecting to have at least one Shadow Essence. So your game pretty much starts on turn 6, which means you have to stall till turn 6. You've only got like 2 Holy Novas, 2 Pains, and Deaths. And then you have to kind of like work your way up to turn 10, where you can do this big combo where you go Eternal Servitude and all the spells. By this point, you have to have drawn all the spells as well. It's a very difficult deck to pull off. I love the concept. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
the idea of Malygos Priest, and I love the idea that it's a good deck and that it sees play. And we're gonna jump onto mine just now, and we're gonna like because I also wanted to try and make this work. I just think that the deck is very difficult to work. I'm definitely gonna play with it. Day one, I'm gonna be making this. Is probably gonna be the one of the first 3 decks I make because it's one of the decks I'm most excited to. But it's very, very, very difficult to get it to work consistently and for it to actually be effective, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, ultimately, this deck really is more of a concept, right? We could be talking about Silence Priest and Dragon Priest and, those kind of decks, which honestly are not necessarily going to change that much. They're still going to be alright when they are, good in the particular metas. But, this deck is really the deck that stuck out to both of us, this sort of Malygos combo, with the Eternal Servitudes and the Shadow Essences. So it is definitely something to try. It's probably not going to be particularly good, right? If you think about it, it's just worse at its job than, let's say, something like Quest Mage, even. So, like it can pull off the Malygos combos, but mm, it is consistency is a big issue.
yeah. If anything, it'll be good in the first 2 weeks
Yeah,
when everyone's
and
playing greedy stuff.
yeah, and then your version of the deck, the major differences here are that you're playing no gadgets and auctioneers. You're playing Yashaj. Um, Obviously another
Uh,
good target for the Shadow Essences and Bonds, as well
yeah,
as you're playing the Binding Heals to just, I suppose, have a
yeah.
bit more.
So yeah, so as I mean, you pointed out the big difference. The big difference is the Yasharaj and the Binding Heals, and obviously I'm also playing 2 Power Shields. Um, Now the powered shields, it's weird because there's like no minions in the deck, right? There's literally 2 minions in the deck. Sorry, 3 minions in the deck. So it's pretty much the same concept, right? You want to get the Malygos out through Bonds. You want to get the Malygos out through the Shadow Essence. But I really like Yasharaj because you can Bonds Yashaj or Yasharaj, whatever your
Yashaj,
preference
huh?
is. I say Yasharaj. Anyways,
Whatever.
you can bounce Yasharaj, and then Yasharaj can pull the actual Yasharaj, right? Then suddenly you've got this 3/4, this 1/1, and this 10/10. That's the dream scenario. But the thing is, even if you don't, you can pull Malygos. Obviously, Malygos then is threatened by cards like Devolve and Polymorph,
And
but
Hex.
and Hex. But I mean, it's mainly just really Hex and Polymorph, right? Like even Devolve, getting an 8/8 on turn 5 isn't bad, right? So Devolve's not really one. So you're mainly worried about the big removals like the Sap, the Hex, and the Polymorph. Um, and those are quite specific. So getting a Malygos out early isn't the worst thing in the world. It's not really what you want to do. You almost always want to get the Malygos off the bonds. But I'm just saying, getting it off something like the Yashaj isn't bad. And just the fact that Yashaj is such a powerful card to get off bonds, really, really makes or I feel makes the deck quite a bit stronger. We have cards like Power Shield, which seems very weird because the deck has like no minions. The main thing you're going to be doing there is probably Power Shielding some random minion of your opponents that you might Shadow Word Death or Pain later in the game, or Shadow Word. Oh, sorry, is it Shadow Word Horror? Do I even have that in the deck? Oh, I don't even have.
No.
Oh, I don't have that in the deck. Okay, sorry, never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Personally, I'm not a big fan of the Power Word Shield with no actual targets. Like it's great because you kind of need more ways to cycle, and that's important. But
yeah,
honestly, I think like with the charge, you could honestly maybe get a bit greedier and actually play some other more interesting big minions. Like even Lich King or something like that. That does have some other kind of effects. You obviously weaken your Eternal Servitude Malygos synergy as well as your Barnes Malygos synergy as well as your Shadow Essence Malygos synergy. So it's kind of like a trade-off there, right? But then we're kind of becoming more of an Eternal Servitude's Shadow Essence deck rather than a strictly Malygos deck. So
yeah,
I think the Yashaj is definitely an interesting option. The Shadow Essence is kind of like a second and third Barnes in many ways. So when you start pulling Yashaj with Shadow Essence, that is also really powerful. So
def
you can fill your deck with big minions as well and play like let's say big, easy priest.
easy.
Easy.
I'm curious because okay, so what actually happened was I had auctioneers in this list earlier, right?
Yeah.
And that's why the Binding Heels are there. I just noticed that the Binding Heels are still there because I wasn't just playing Binding Heels because I think they're a good card because I don't. I was playing right before when we were making the decks before this review. I had double auctioneer and no Yashaj. And then like at the last minute, I was like, oh, Yashaj could be good, so I took the auctioneers out and put in Yashaj and something else. I don't really know what. Oh, it's the Holy
Holy
Fire.
Fire.
Yeah, the Holy Fire, which the Holy Fire I actually think is actually good, which I'll explain in a second. Um, but I'm just curious, would you be able to get away? You remove the power word shields, would you be able to get away with double auctioneer instead of those power word shields? Because I think they could maybe be quite good. Like
I
auctioneer of
think so.
Barnes isn't terrible. Auctioneer off the Yashaj is also quite good.
Yeah, I think you could get away with the auctioneer. Like, uh, I mean, auctioneer of your charge isn't that great because you don't get a chance to use the auctioneer. But if it sticks on the board, it's fine. And
Yeah.
it also means if you have the Eternal Servitude in hand, you can resurrect an auctioneer for 4. So I think that would definitely help a lot um, with the card draw issues, and like auctioneer is basically just a lot of card draw in one card for this deck, right? That's all we're
Yes.
like looking at it for basically. It's because we need to draw a lot of cards. This is a combo deck. We're trying to make it work, and it's
There's no.
kind of
We have
yeah,
to reduce how many minions we have, which is very difficult because most card draw cards are minion based, right?
yeah,
Like
like
even Power
Northshire
Shield is a
clerics.
spell, is a
Yeah,
minion. It's minion based. Purify is a draw card. It's a spell, but it's minion based, right?
yeah,
That's the issue that we currently have.
yeah,
Okay, so the one other issue before we move on from this deck that I just want to touch on very briefly is the Malygos combo. So there's the 6 mana combo where you go Shadow Essence into Malygos and then you go double Mind Blast. That's only 20 damage.
yeah,
Like the Dream is Eternal Servitude Malygos, and then you can go like double Mind Blast plus double Holy Smite.
yeah,
But the main issue that we both kind of came to, the main issue that we both came up with is that it's very difficult to actually reduce your opponent's health down to that combo mark. So I see you've got the Shadow Word Anduin, I don't know the name, the
Shadow
Death
Reaper
Knight.
Anvil.
I mean,
Yeah,
that can definitely help with that. That two
mm,
damage every turn, even just throwing it to the face. Like it seems random. Oh, just like your opponent might not see it coming, right? And that's kind of why I have the Holy Fire there. That's the main issue of the deck. Just want to point that out. If anybody wants to try the deck, that is going to be that is probably the biggest downfall. We have the Shadow Visions, so you can get that third Mind Blast. So you can go like Eternal
or
Servitude into
third
triple
Holy
Mind
Smite.
Blast, or Holy Smite. Yeah,
Because
like
because more Holy Smites is better. Like,
yes,
I mean,
yes,
4 Holy Smites and a Mind Blast is the most damage you're going to get on the Eternal Servitude Malygos turn.
yes.
It's the other consideration is something like the um, Radiant Elemental to try and make the synergy cheaper, right? Maybe get more spells out of it. But like that pollutes your deck with more minions, so
Yes.
it really
So
doesn't
yeah,
work.
exactly. The issue with that is that it doesn't, unlike the Auctioneer, unlike the Yasharaj, unlike the Malygos, it doesn't actually have any synergy outside of the main combo, right?
Yeah, outside
It's
of the
not a card
actual
that,
finishing.
yes. So that's the issue. Anyways,
Yeah.
I think we've pretty much said everything about the deck. The deck looks really fun, and I'm really excited to play it. I just don't know how good it's going to be, but
Yeah,
could be interesting.
honestly, I mean, this is not a deck I foresee being tier 1. Disclaimer, we're just excited about it because we like Malygos combo decks.
It's going to be tier 4, boy.
Okay, next we have a priest deck that might be a little bit better. Kind of the priest that was promised from previous expansion. This is a Death Rattle Awaken the Maker's Quest priest. So the big card that kind of encouraged us to go for this Death Rattle priest is that Obsidian Statue.
I
Who's
thought it was Office.
Office is a
I'm joking.
consider yeah. Uh, anyway, um, so the Obsidian Statue is really great from effects like Barnes, which is in the deck, as well as one Shadow Essence, just basically because I couldn't find space for a second one. But it's a really good minion to bring from that, and it also is pretty good. Also, like even after the quest, it's really good as well, right? Like the thing with the quest priest is even after you complete the quest, you want to actually have other minions that are pretty good and not just a bunch of like bad death rattle minions, right? And Obsidian Statue is pretty good after the quest as well. It's also really good to bring back with Zoth. That's the other big synergy in the deck. You know, you can maybe only summon 4 death rattle minions, and then you play Zoth. That brings back another 4 for you.
Yeah.
So Zoth
Um,
helps a lot. It's just very slow. Like very slow to complete the quest after in Zoth. And honestly, if you're in Zoth, like what do you really need a Mara for? Because you shouldn't be losing after you bring back like four things within Zoth.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I actually saw Zaytalot too. If you don't know, Zaytalot is like the best priest player in the world. It's unchallenged. He just is the best priest player. He only plays priest. It's exclusive. His priest wins are over like 20,000, I think, something crazy. And he, interestingly enough, just I think 2 or 3 weeks ago was playing N'Zoth, a N'Zoth priest that he was playing competitively at top 100 legend ladder. I mean, obviously this is old meta, but it's still then. And he just said, and it didn't have Awaken the Makers, which is the interesting thing. And he was like, don't ask about the quest. The quest is bad. It's not worth playing, even in N'Zoth priest.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's going to apply now, but it's just something to keep in mind. Like if Zedalot was saying that then, it's probably still true now. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah,
Obviously, this is
definitely.
just a concept deck. Sorry?
No, no, definitely. I actually do agree completely that this deck is probably better if you just drop Awaken the Makers and play another Shadow Essence. That's probably
Yeah.
just better.
My main thing with the deck is that I'm curious about. I like the Shadow Visions. I think that's very cool. Um, I don't like the Lyra and the Double Radiant Elemental. I feel like there's just not enough spells to actually make that combo worthwhile. You've only got two Potion of Madness, two Power Word Shields, and then you've got like the situational pains and deaths, right? And the Spirit Lashes. Those are
Spirit
cards
Lash.
that you want to, yeah, yeah, but you want to save those for when you actually need them, right? You don't
Yeah.
just want to throw them out randomly. I just think the Lyra and the Radiant Elementals are a bit off theme. Wouldn't you say? I'd prefer to play like I like the deck, but I prefer to play two Holy Novas in that spot and maybe a second Shadow Essence.
Uh, yeah, it is definitely possible to play that. Lyra is also a good target from the Barnes or the Shadow Essence, right?
That's true.
That
Yeah,
that's
that's
part of the
true.
other synergy. Even Radiant Elemental is not that terrible from them as it does get the spell reduction, so you can power word shield in the same turn or something, right? A 5/5 Radiant Elemental is actually pretty good, right? That
Yeah,
that
but you
that's part of the
also don't have
thing.
the Northshire Clerics, right? That's the other thing.
Yeah, the Northshire Cleric is something that like is a tough cut, but something that was cut because honestly the deck is not often necessarily going to be on board enough to actually get draw from the Northshire Clerics. They're like a little bit situational, I would say, in this deck, right? Whereas the Crystalline Oracle is there to help with the quest, but essentially cut down to one because of space issues. Total and Shellraiser is just another good thing to bring back from the N'Zoth because you're bringing it back and you actually, have another taunt, right? That's the big thing. Like with this N'Zoth, now you have like four taunts you can bring back, not including bonds and Shadow Essence extra copies of cards, right? There's the Total and Shellraise as well as the Obsidian Statues. It means your N'Zoth is a lot more defensive, and I think that's the one really big thing about N'Zoth going into the new meta for Priest is that N'Zoth actually has really good targets to bring back in this Obsidian Statue. So the N'Zoth Priest might well just be viable, and the Awaken the Makers is probably a little unnecessary. You can honestly hold Awaken the Makers to play with Radiant Elemental and
Yeah,
Lyra
I don't
if
think
that
this is the
happens.
build of Nzoth Priest, but I think Nzoth Priest definitely has a chance to make it back.
Yeah, and the one other interesting synergy we haven't really touched on a bit, touched on much is Office, that you joked about. It's obviously a neutral card, so we haven't covered it yet, but it will be in our main neutral review. It's a 4 mana 2/2 with Death Rattle. Add a Death Knight card to your hand. So once again, that's another spell that you can synergize with, well, most likely a spell that you can synergize with the Radiant Elementals and the Lyra. So I don't believe, like, I still don't think Lyra is necessarily that bad. But anyway, Office is obviously a good target from Barnes, a great target from Shadow Essences. The Death Knight spells are pretty powerful, and we'll get to those when we get to the neutral review.
Cool.
So yeah, the Death Rattle Priest, N'Zoth Priest, whether it's Quest Priest or N'Zoth Priest, is definitely going to be something interesting. Honestly, I just started with the quest and went from there. This is kind of more a showcase of maybe how that deck could look rather
Yeah.
than, let's saying that the Awaken the Makers part is what will make it good. I just found it a little funny that it might be that this expansion they actually fulfill the Quest Priest
Yeah.
plan from the last one. Okay, and then speaking of priests from yesteryear, you have a Highlander kind of priest here. With that good old Kazakus making a return. No Reno these days, but you've
Always
gone
welcome.
for, yeah, you've gone for a Highlander priest here. So what is it about this expansion that you think will make this kind of singleton priest viable again.
Look, I really don't know if it's viable. I just think it's a very interesting deck tech. It looks quite it looks it's I threw this together very quickly, but it looks fun and looks interesting. Um, I think that cards like Obsidian Statue, that you can get away with just playing one of because of how high the mana cost is,
Mm.
and cards like Shadow Reaper Anduin. The main inspiration for this deck, of course, was Raza and Shadow Reaper Anduin's
Void
hero
for
power,
void.
which is I forget.
Deals 2 damage and is refreshed every time you play a card. So if it's 0 mana from the Raza, then all of a sudden every time you play a card, you're just getting a free 2 damage to something, and that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So I mean, the main inspiration behind creating this deck is the idea that you can play a bunch of cards, like stall out the game, do some just normal control priest things. So you'll see we have Lyra the Sunshard, we have powered shields and whatnot. We have the wacky combos like the pint-sized potion and the Shadowwood Horror. We've got cards like Dragonfire Potion, Holy Nova, just your general control priest stall cards. And like of course your Radiant Elemental, etc. But then we've got some interesting cards in like the Auction Master Beardo, Raza the Unchained, and Shadow Reaper Anduin. And the idea is that you kind of do control priest shenanigans as you would normally, stall out the game, deal a little bit of chip damage to your opponent's hero here and there. You've got the Arcanine Soul Priest to do stuff like that as well. With I especially included Mistress of Mixtures because it's good in the early game, but it can also be combined with Arcanine Soul Priest late game to
Hmm.
deal like 4 damage to the enemy hero. And so what I keep going off is that the idea is you play Raza at some point because the deck is just singletons, and then you play Shadow Reaper Anduin, and now you've got this new fancy hero power that refreshes every time you play a card. You can hero power, play Auction Master Beardo, play a spell of your choice, then hero power again, play another spell, hero power again, play another spell, hero power
Well,
again,
the thing
etc.
is, you don't need to auction Master Beardo. Your hero power just refreshes anyway. Every time,
Wait, don't lie.
every time you play a spell, it just refreshes. It's just as after you play a card, refresh this.
Don't
So
lie.
it has built-in auction Master Beardo effect.
Oh, I'm such a retard.
I think you were thinking of the Paladin like OTK plan with the auction Master Beardo thing.
I don't know why I was thinking that Auction Master Beardo. I'm so
No, Void Form just kind of has that built in. So, yeah, sure. That's what happens when you need to throw together 30 cards relatively quickly. You sometimes end up with some stupid things like that. But the idea is that, Shadow Reaper Anduin helps a lot because it's another AoE for the deck, right? Uh,
yeah. Okay, so
and
you cut Auction Master Beardo. Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Then the idea is you play Radiant Elemental and you play a bunch of
Yes,
stuff.
yes. Radiant Elemental Lyra in particular is like a
Yeah.
possible OTK because you can actually keep chaining really cheap spells,
Maybe
right?
you cut Auction Master Beardo for a second Radiant Elemental. That's the only thing, and then you can get away with 2 Radiant Elementals.
Yeah. I mean,
Hey,
with with these decks, the one thing is that you kind of want to play 2 Dragonfire potions in most control, and Shadow Reaper Anduin kind of acts like a little bit of a third one, a little bit of a third,
Yeah.
important board clear, and it's just having those various options for board clear that makes it really important, really powerful, as well as just the hero power, as you say, for that sort of combo, especially with the Raza, that
It's a
makes it
secondary
very
win
powerful.
condition. That's the other thing. It's the
Yes.
idea. It's somewhat a build around because we have the combo in there. Well, I thought there was a build around because you've got Auction Master Beardo, but you don't even need an Auction Master Beardo. But like you've got cards like the Lich King, you've got cards like Shadow Essence, which is a cool card. You've got card like Lyra, and you've got Kazuka. So it's just kind of like a secondary win condition that you can throw in there.
Yeah, and very often you might even pick Kazakas for one in this if you are looking to actually win
Yeah.
with the combo because
Yeah.
it allows you to refresh the hero power then. Yeah, so definitely an interesting deck. Probably you could probably even start fitting some exhaust shenanigans into this deck, right? As well with maybe some death rattle stuff to make space, depending on if you want to go more value oriented or more control oriented. That is kind of the nature of all these Highlander decks is that they tend to be sort of very tech heavy because they have quite a few flex slots.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely another interesting direction for Priest. And as we mentioned, I don't really expect Silence Priest to go anywhere. I don't really know if anything that it new is really that useful. Eternal Servitude can be used to bring back some of your, like a Humongous Razor Leaf. Maybe you don't even have to play the Ancient Watcher. For instance. So there are some kind of synergies that might help, but overall, I think that the deck's not going to be changed very much. And Dragon Priest, I built a Dragon Priest, and then I started refining it, and it basically came down to it added Bone Drake, and otherwise it was no new cards. So that's why we're not showing it here. Bone Drake, I think, is a pretty good card for Dragon Priest, and it just helps make their Dragon synergies more reliable. So, yeah, that's all we really have for this Priest review. What are your thoughts about where Priest is going to be as a whole in the meta?
Are we giving it a rating out of 5?
No, no, no rating. Just as an idea. Tier one, tier two. Like, I mean, you don't strictly have to say a tier, but do you think we're gonna have more priests archetypes that are viable? Less? Do you think it's gonna be still a fringe pick in tournaments and whatnot? How do you
So
see it?
I think it comes down to the power level of Dragon Priest mainly.
Yeah,
Like we have quite a few control cards added. The issue with that is that it's very easy to and now I'm going to talk from a very competitive standpoint here. It's very easy to hit a control deck, right? There's a lot of ways. You've got decks like Miracle Rogue, your staples, like just a lot of mid-range decks. Hearthstone works different from other card games. Generally, in Hearthstone, a mid-range deck, correct me if I'm wrong, but a mid-range deck is quite good against a control deck, control good against aggro, and aggro good against mid-range, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
on
And
average.
and mid-range decks in Hearthstone, just with the cards we've seen, I think we're going to be leaning on that kind of like, oh, we're finally going to get that control meta. But as soon as that happens, you just see a flood of mid-range decks, right? And there are a lot of cards at the moment that have been in the game for ages that have been waiting for this time to seize this mid-range opportunity. So I don't think Priest is going to rest on Control Priest. I think it's going to rest on Dragon Priest's shoulders. I think
Mhm.
that's going to be the strength of the class. Dragon Priest, as you said, Silence Priest. I mean, Silence Priest isn't really going anywhere, is it?
No.
It doesn't look like it's going anywhere. And Control Priest is going to be okay. I think it's going to be, but at best, I think it's going to be bottom of tier two, like just near the bottom of tier two, like fringing tier three, right? I definitely think it's going to come down to the strength of the new Dragon Priest, which we'll definitely see a Dragon Priest Resurrection, and maybe just maybe, there's a Priest deck that is tier two, reasonable tier two, but I don't think we're going to see a tier one Priest deck.
Yeah, I think ultimately Priest is going to be that extra control deck if you want to have a control only lineup in something like Conquest or something like that. It's an alternate option for those kind of decks. And it has some different matchups to other control decks, but overall it's kind of falls with prey to a lot of the other control issues. Shadow Reaper Anduin helps against Jade Druid, but ultimately doesn't really solve the inevitability issue unless you start doing some cheeky combos with it. So, yep,
Oh, disclaimer.
yeah.
I'm not. I don't know if it's a disclaimer, but I do think that the Control Priest deck that does succeed, if there is one, is the old Lyra build. Like an, or not the old Lyra, but like an older,
You
like
mean
an
the
old builder.
pre-Medivh being in control priest thing?
Pre-Medivh.
Well, yeah, Medivh is just in control priest these days with free from amber and
Oh yeah,
flying
yeah.
control creatures.
I mean, I mean, okay. Well, I just mean, I don't think it's gonna be a new. I don't think it's gonna be like in Zoth Control Priest, right? I mean, Zoth
Oh,
Control Priest could
okay.
be good at some point. It might actually be good, but I'm just saying, I think the optimal version will be like a Lyra version. Uh, just my opinion.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, priest. It's pretty good news, I'd still say, for priest players. There's a lot of interesting priest decks to play, and I'm actually looking forward to playing priest in this expansion. But whether that they're actually going to be top tier competitive is a whole nother story. So, yep, that's all we really have for this priest one. We'll be back for
Rogue One.
yeah, rogue mage next. You can find us on Twitter at ZamokHS and at dev_gaming. If you want to, you know, tell us we're wrong about all these priest things, or if you have some interesting ideas maybe about the decks, or you want to share your ideas, there's also obviously the comments and like and subscribe, follow, all those helpful things that help the channel grow, and give us any feedback you have regarding the reviews that we're doing. Thanks a lot.